Hello, invisible friend. April here, and the date today is August 24th, 2026. Welcome to episode 356 of the Big Sky Astrology Podcast. This week begins with Mercury entering its home sign of Virgo, where it will come together in a cleansing cazimi conjunction with the Sun. A lunar eclipse in Pisces is flavored by disruptive Uranus. Vitality, ego, communication, travel, and commerce are shaken up as Mercury and the Sun square off with Uranus. And I answer a listener question about haircuts. Mercury enters Virgo on Tuesday, August 25th at 4:04 a.m. Pacific Time, and it stays in this sign until September 10th. Mercury is at its strongest in Virgo, both in its rulership and its exaltation. If you're looking for an ideal period to launch a project that requires keen analytical powers and practical know-how, here you have it. The Sabian symbol that begins the sign of Virgo even alludes to this. It's one Virgo, a man's head. Apart from this earthy practicality, Mercury has another face. It's the Psychopomp, or a guide who translates messages between the living and the dead. This role goes back to its mythological roots. Mercury was the only god who could travel freely between this world and the underworld. Mercury rules transitions, thresholds, and the liminal spaces where we are no longer one thing, but not yet quite another. It's the ruler of daily communication and logic, yes, but Psychopomp Mercury is also able to dig deep into the psychological realm, including the shadow. In times of major life changes or the death of somebody close to us, Mercury is the inner guide that helps us navigate this kind of territory. And this will be especially helpful this week as we navigate the Pisces Lunar Eclipse, which can take us to a deeper place than most. I just want to give a quick shout out to the work of Vanessa Couto and her work on Mercury as a psychopomp. I'll put a link to her article about this in the show notes. Mercury makes a conjunction with the Sun on Thursday, August 27th at 10:04 a.m. Pacific Time at 4 degrees 26 minutes Virgo. When a planet is in a conjunction with the Sun within 17 minutes of arc, it's called cazimi. Cazimi means in the heart of the Sun, and a planet in this position benefits from being so close to the Sun, often with brilliant insights, especially creative ones. Now, when a planet is close to the Sun, but not that close, within 7 to 8 degrees of the Sun, it's not close enough to be cazimi, and it's actually considered debilitated and is called combust, meaning it's burned up by the rays of the Sun. But possibly, when a planet is very strong in its own sign, this can be a mitigating factor, and Mercury is very strong in Virgo. This cazimi period is exact at 10:03 a.m. on August 27th, and it's within orb of this 17-minute arc on August 27th between 3:15 a.m. and 4:54 p.m. Pacific Time. So here is a day to look deep, to consider how you could frame difficulties in your own life in a more positive way. and even to ask those closest to you for input. The Sun-Mercury conjunction is exact at 4 degrees 26 minutes Virgo on the Sabian symbol 5 Virgo, a man dreaming of fairies. It's a symbol of opening up to some of the more subtle dimensions of reality, which is normally not one of Virgo's stronger attributes. So it's a pretty nice symbol, actually, to see this cazimi. And now it's time for the moon report. And we begin, as always, with the week's major lunation. This week, it's the Pisces full moon lunar eclipse on Thursday, August 27th at 9:18 p.m. Pacific Time at 4 degrees 54 minutes Pisces and Virgo. This is the full moon in the Leo new moon cycle that began at that solar eclipse on August 12th at 20 degrees Leo. And it's the penultimate eclipse on the Virgo-Pisces axis. Eclipses happen in a particular polarity of signs for about 18 months at a time. And they are wrapping up their time in Virgo and Pisces. The lunar eclipse in Virgo on February 20th, 2027 is the last eclipse on this axis for a while. And this is the last eclipse in Pisces until 2034. Oh, Pisces eclipses. There's a certain amount of emotional pain that can come with these eclipses. Pain and grief and loss, all wrapped up together in one uncomfortable lump. You know, we talk a lot about Pisces being dreamy or abstract. I'm not saying that's completely untrue, but there isn't actually a lot of discussion about why that might be so. There is a lot of sensitivity in this sign, and it feels the hard emotions pretty deeply. And so might you at an eclipse like this one. The story with grief, for example, is that it's about an event, but more to the point, it's a process that we go through. Talk to someone who lost a loved one 20 years ago, and you might still see their eyes well up with tears. And at this eclipse, you might be that someone. Anyone who doesn't understand that has probably not lost someone close to them yet. Eclipses are turning points, and you're not obligated to let go of the past or to what you feel about it, but you're just about at a point where those feelings are starting to turn in another direction. This is an eclipse point that makes a square aspect to Uranus at 5 degrees 37 minutes Gemini. So Pisces' sensitive side is being even more strongly pushed by disruptive change. You're allowed to have feelings about that and to try to find something, some person or relationship or some other anchor to try to ground yourself. This is the full moon in a lunar phase family cycle that began with the new moon on February 27th, 2025 at 9 degrees 40 minutes Pisces. It was followed 9 months later by a first quarter moon on November 27th, 2025 at 6 degrees 17 minutes Pisces. That would have been a moment in this lunar phase family cycle when you were invited to take action on whatever it was that you were planning at that Pisces new moon. Look to the Pisces house in your chart to try to identify what that might have been. You might have been wanting to invite more of a spiritual practice into your life, for example. And at that first quarter moon would have been time maybe to visit some kind of house of worship or to take a yoga class or a meditation class. 9 months after that first quarter, and we are at the full moon in this cycle. And of course, it is an eclipse. So what happens at a full moon is all is revealed. We begin to actually see what it was that we were planting and the intentions that we had around the new moon. And this is especially important with the full moon in Pisces, because a new moon is always a little bit of a dark time and we don't necessarily know exactly what seeds we're planting. So the full moon is very important because it reveals to us what we were trying to do, what we were trying to accomplish, and what we were seeking at that new moon. 9 months from now, there's a last quarter moon at 7 degrees and 1 minute Pisces on May 28th, 2027. And that is the wrap-up point to this cycle. It says you can make one last push to try to accomplish something that you had in mind at that new moon, or just to get perspective on what it was. And that also is an important part of the cycle. Let's look at the void of course moon periods for this week. On Sunday, August 23rd, the moon in Capricorn squares Venus at 11:30 p.m. Pacific time. It's void of course for 1 day, 2 hours, and 32 minutes, and then enters Aquarius on Tuesday, August 25th at 2:02 a.m. So we're beginning this week on a void of course moon. And there is a conflict that comes from the moon square another planet as it is going void of course. There is some kind of disagreement or conflict or something that we are trying to deal with. There could be communication difficulties or obstacles to overcome related to relationships and finances because Venus is involved. And these problems could come from an authority figure in the form of constructive criticism that lands a little bit harshly. Use this void of course moon period to initiate a habit of setting your feelings to one side and consider well-meaning advice from an authority figure, such as a boss or a parent, to help you manage relationships and finances more effectively. On Wednesday, August 26th, the moon in Aquarius trines Venus in Libra at 2:59 p.m. Pacific time. It's void of course for 21 hours and 5 minutes, and then enters Pisces on Thursday, August 27th at 12:04 p.m. The moon trine another planet as it goes void of course brings a gift, a blessing, a reward. This void of course moon period is taking place between sociable signs Aquarius and Libra. If you discover a networking group online or in your area, this would be a good time to check it out. If socializing with professional colleagues doesn't sound appealing, do a quick search for groups that speak to a hobby that you would like to learn more about. If you want to learn more about astrology or tarot, even if it's just for one meeting, it would be a perfect way to spend this void of course moon period. There are countless stories of people who have developed life-changing relationships just by attending an online course or a meetup gathering. Use this void of course moon period to get into a habit of participating in groups, trying a new one from time to time, with a focus on topics that you would like to learn more about. And on Friday, August 28th, the moon in Pisces trines Mars in Cancer at 9:14 a.m. Pacific time. It's void of course for 1 day, 10 hours and 24 minutes. So many long void of course moons this week. And then it enters Aries on Saturday, August 29th at 7:38 p.m. Here is another gift between the moon and a planet that it's trining. This void of course moon period is taking place between water signs, the creative and intuitive signs of Pisces and Cancer. If you've been procrastinating on a home beautification project, now is the time to put that home-centric Mars in Cancer to work. Use this void of course moon period to use excess energy constructively and create a beautiful oasis that you can retreat into. Make your home into a sanctuary. On Friday, August 28th at 12:24 a.m. and 3:19 p.m. Pacific Time, Mercury and the Sun at 5 degrees 37 minutes Virgo, square Uranus in Gemini. The Sabian symbol for Mercury and the Sun is 6 Virgo, a merry-go-round. Uranus is on 6 Gemini, drilling for oil. With the merry-go-round symbol present, we can figure that something in our lives is going around and around in circles. Maybe it's us. Maybe it's that Virgo quality of getting so wound up in details that we can't quite break out of our brains, or maybe an obsessive pursuit of some kind of activity or hobby. These kinds of circular patterns can definitely take hold when Mercury is in Virgo, one of its strongest signs. But in this case, Uranus can be helpful because it can disrupt those endless patterns that don't go anywhere. It's on the symbol drilling for oil, and that's a sign of being willing to dig deeply toward one thing, getting off the merry-go-round and standing still for a while, digging deeply instead of just going around in circles. The sun symbolizes who we think we are and who we're used to being, who we identify with. In Virgo, we might fall into a pattern of scrutinizing ourselves really closely and maybe even being quite critical of ourselves. Uranus can interrupt this pattern and give us a chance to dig deeper into ourselves, not in a critical way, but in pursuit of true self-discovery. Drill deeper for that precious fuel that runs your engine. In this week's listener question, we have a delightful question from listener Elisa, who writes, I have a question about haircuts and astrology. I think the moon is the most influential planet here, but would love some more education on the subject overall. I am cutting my hair in the next week or so to make a wig for my friend who has cancer. It'll be a big chop, 10 plus inches, and I want to make sure it's imbued with sweetness and good health. I am a Gemini sun, Aquarius moon, Scorpio rising. She is a Leo sun, Virgo moon, and Leo rising. Alyssa, this is such a lovely gesture that you're making to your friend to replenish some of her Leo mane with hair from her sweet friend. That is so lovely. So, when I was a little girl on the farm, my Aunt Eleanor liked to cut hair according to the moon, and she always reported good results. The main factor that I remember was that if you want your hair to grow back faster, as you say, it depends on the moon. You should cut it on a waxing phase of the moon between the new and full moons. Now that assumes that you want to encourage growth of the hair. If you're cutting it really short and you want to keep it pretty short, it will grow probably less quickly if you do it on one of the waning phases. Aunt Eleanor liked to use the moon in Sagittarius, if possible. And I'm not entirely sure why. It could be that Sagittarius, along with Pisces, is ruled by Jupiter, the greater benefic. So fortunate was Jupiter considered to be, even by older astrologers like William Lilly, that even matters that normally were considered less auspicious, like a void of course moon, say, was said to be able to perform a bit. Lilly said, performeth somewhat, if the moon were in one of these Jupiter-ruled signs. I kind of doubt Aunt Eleanor was aware of this, though probably the Farmer's Almanac made note of it. But it was a piece of folklore that was probably handed down through generations. So, a waxing moon, and if possible, a moon in Sagittarius or Pisces is what I would probably recommend. Some sources do mention using a Leo moon, since Leo is generally associated with a thick, glorious mane of hair. And I suppose it's not a bad idea overall, although I tend to think of Leo as a less lush and fertile kind of sign. Anyway, given your intention that this gift be imbued with sweetness and good health, I would recommend a waxing Pisces moon. At this particular time as I'm recording this, that puts us in the early hours of the Pisces moon, before the lunar eclipse in that sign. What a lovely question, Elisa, and a beautiful gift for your friend. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some very practical astrology with our listeners. It's very appropriate during Virgo season. If you have a burning question about astrology that you would like me to answer on the podcast, please leave a message of 1 minute or less at speakpipe.com/Big Sky Astrology Podcast. Or you can just drop me an email, april@bigskyastrology.com, and be sure to put podcast question in the subject line. Well, that is everything I have on my show sheet, so I'm going to wrap this one up. Thank you for listening to the Big Sky Astrology Podcast. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe or follow the show in your app of choice. Leave a rating or a review, and I hope that you'll help spread the word by telling an astrology-loving friend about the podcast. You can read show notes and full transcripts and leave your comments about each episode at bigskyastropod.com. Thanks so much to everyone who has shown support for the podcast over the past year and during last September's Podathon. On each episode, I'm thanking some of my financial donors by name. This week, let's give a Big Sky Astrology Podcast shout out to Leslie Wade, Kayla Grant, and Carrie LaRoche-Senet. Carrie, Kayla, and Leslie, thank you so much for listening to the podcast and for supporting the show with your donations. If you would like to support the show and receive access to my bonus video episodes for donors only, please go to bigskyastropod.com and make a contribution of $10 or more. You can make a one-time donation in any amount or become an ongoing monthly contributor. And just a reminder that our 7th annual Podathon is coming up this Labor Day week, beginning September 7th. Each weekday through September 11th, I'll be featuring conversations with 5 of my colleagues on topics that my clients ask about most. We will hear from Lene Van Horn on moving house, Samuel Reynolds on career, Kira Sutherland on health, Donna Stellhorn on money, and Dorothy Oja on relationships. How's that for a lineup? I can't wait to bring these interviews to you. Well, that is it for this episode. Join me again bright and early next Monday. And until then, keep your feet on the ground and your eyes on the stars.